Hi, and welcome to Equilter Quick Tips. I'm Dana, and I manage customer service here at Equilter. Today, we're going to be talking about marking for matching magic. Our quilt today, called St. Nicholas, requires that we work on bias and stretchy edges. That can put a little bit of a challenge into getting our points and corners matching. But today we'll have some tips for you as to how to make that work best. Bias can happen when we're cutting a square on point, and the design is more important than the grain. It can also happen when we work with triangles or with diamonds. And so these tips for marking our reference points will help us bring the quilt back to the dimension it needs to be, and our points will match and things will come together very easily. Now, I've got all my little squares cut and ready to go. The snowflakes I cut on point, and we've got a fairly stretchy edge there. The blue fern we cut straight of grain. The triangles we cut from squares, and that makes for one edge. The longer edge is going to be that bias, and that's going to be stretchy. When we cut the snowflakes on point, that's also going to be a little bit stretchy. So we want to take care in handling these things. Most important is knowing exactly where my reference points are on both the triangle and the squares. And I find the easiest way to do that, we want to mark 1/4 inch in on all 3 edges here and all 4 edges here at the corners so that we know exactly where those reference points are. This is kind of like stay stitching when we're making garments, or the busy steps you need to go through to prepare for a feast. Think of the end result. Put on your favorite music, and we'll get the marking done. One little trick about marking is that your pencil or pen, whatever you're using for your marking, also adds dimension. So it's important that as you are making these marks, you're learning where on your ruler to position it, and then checking when you mark that is the 1/4 inch that we need. So we're going to mark these 2 corners along the long line. Then I turn and mark here and here. And then I do the same here and here. My pencil's going to get dull as I work, so again, I sharpen it, but I recheck and make sure that I'm working at 1/4 inch. So now it always surprises me how far in that mark point is on a triangle. Now, on the blue fern, I used a darker marker, but again, you can see those 4 corners are all marked, and they're marked on the white snowflake as well. Normally I would not use a dark marker, but I wanted to be able to make sure that it showed in our video today. So we're marked and ready to rock and roll at the sewing machine. Okay, so now it's time to match my triangle up with the square of the snowflake on point. I like to put a pin vertically through the 2 places so that I can see that we're exactly matched and lined up where we need to be. And then holding the pin vertically, I put in a crosswise pin so I can sew and not distort the matching that I've done so carefully. And as you see, I've also done it at this edge, so we'll get us a pin here to mark, and then I can take that vertical pin out. Now I know I'm aligned. And I'm going to start stitching, and of course you know it's terribly important, don't be sewing over your pins. So we'll take a couple stitches here, and then we'll take the pin out and continue stitching clear to the other side. I like to leave the pin in until almost the very end so that it holds that exactly where I need it to be. And then we go on through. The instructions tell us to put a triangle on each side, which we've done here, and to press the seam allowances open, which I've also done. It's now time to align the triangle that will go on the opposite sides, and this one's even a little bit easier because I only have to match my crosshatch with the seam line. Okay, so now we've got the pin, the reference point on the triangle, and the pin is coming right through that seam line where I needed it to be. I've marked it with a pin down here as well to make sure the two ends stay in position while I'm stitching. And I'm going to hold this together with a pin on the fabric plane. Now I can pull out these originating pins, if you will, and then we can stitch. Again, remember, do not sew over your pin, but let your pin help you approach that seam. And while we're on this, you can see that the grain of the fabric is not running even with these squares that we cut on point. This is exactly the reason we're taking so much time to be meticulous in our matching, to make sure that our square comes out to the right size. So why don't we want to sew over our pins? Well, we can break our needle, we can misalign the machine, etc., and want that all to stay together. So there we've got that triangle stitched to one side, and then we'll go off and do this side. And when it's all stitched together, you will see we have these what we call little dog ears. We can trim that off now, we can trim it off later, but you will see that I have 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here that will allow me, when I begin to put these blocks together, to have them match exactly on point. Now it's time to start putting our point squares on together to create the border for St. Nicholas. As you can see, they're going together nicely, and I'm getting really good matching points here. We can pin our squares together at the edges so we know those points are matching exactly. You can see the squares points there. And then by feel, we can make sure, by feel and poke, if you will, we can make sure that that point on the fern matches the point on the snowflake the exact same way we did it when we were aligning points for sewing on the triangles. So with that pin in there vertically and matched up exactly, we can then put a pin parallel to the fabric and know that that will hold it in place while we stitch that seam. Okay, so our border for around St. Nicholas is really starting to take shape. We hope today's segment has given you some good ideas for making it easy to get good points when you're working with bias areas in fabric. Again, it's about marking for matching magic. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.